Every business he starts, everyone condemns it to immediate failure. Everyone thinks it's destined to fail. It cannot be achieved. It's always done on a massive, grandiose scale with a massive, grandiose plan. And he's delivered. I mean, look at SpaceX. SpaceX is probably the most coveted company in the world right now by every other successful business person. If you ask them, they all think SpaceX is the company in the world. And he built that, and people said it's never going to work. This is going to throw good money after bad. It's never going to work. Look at what SpaceX does around the world now. Look at the satellite systems, never mind anything else, are just on a different level to anything we've seen. You know, he's even, I saw the other day, planning to help with the countryside issue in the UK. If you live in the countryside, you don't get a phone signal. He said, I'll sort that for you, right? He just thinks, I'll fix Britain and his phone signal. That's how he thinks. I sat with him in France this summer for a couple of hours, and he was talking about Neuralink and what that does, and SpaceX and what it does, and Tesla and what Tesla was rubbish to start with. Everyone said, this is never going to work. Now it's the most successful green energy car company in the world. And obviously cars will go that way. He's just ahead of everybody, and he understands you can't do it all at once and all these other things. But again, an amazingly transformative, huge, big picture business that he's built. Then you look at X and what he's done there, where most amazing stat the other day, it's gone from 67% Democrat, 32% Republican on X, to now it's pretty well 50-50. That's Elon Musk. He's redressed the balance. He's made it easier for conservatives not to be deplatformed and removed just because of their political allegiance. Again, so he's democratized, if you like, this very undemocratic but massively popular, powerful social media tool. So I look at all the things he's been doing, and I think, actually, what's the common thread here? All of it is a force for good. All of it ultimately is designed to save us from ourselves. It is colonizing Mars, humanoid robots, all these other things he's doing. But look at the thing, the space rocket when it landed in the cradle, right? Just the sheer mind-blowing scale of ambition that Musk has. And he believes we'll get to Mars in his lifetime and we'll start colonizing. And he thinks it's really important. So my point is, if you look at it, what is a superhero? A superhero is somebody who thinks on a massively big scale for the good of the people and often saves the people from themselves. By that criteria, and I'm not saying he's a perfect human being, he can be difficult and all the rest of it, of course he can. And he wouldn't say he's perfect himself. But by a superhero criteria, right now in the world, who is having a bigger transformative superhero world right now than Elon Musk?
Yes.
What I do think is, if I would put money on anyone to slash unnecessary bureaucracy and spending in the federal government, it would be Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I wish he'd come here and do it here.
Yeah, I'm very pleased about him and Vivek doing.
I have one question. If we put Elon Musk in charge of the National Health Service here, what would happen?
Be great.
I can absolutely guarantee he'd turn it around. The guy is a genius. So I think he is a superhero. It doesn't come with no caveats, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone. Well, it's very interesting with Musk, is what I think. You very rarely see that level of elite brain power that mixes with a love of being a celebrity, which he clearly does, and limelight, with the super chilling self-confidence to back himself. That's what I love about him. He will bet the ranch on his own gut instincts. To a degree, Trump's a bit like that. And they'll just barrel through all the naysayers who go, you can't do that because it's never worked before. And they're like, yeah, sure we can. And they do it. I like people like that. They're not always going to be right. But it's a bit like the old Wayne Gretzky, the ice hockey player's great quote. You'll miss 100% of the shots you never take. These guys take shot after shot after shot. In Trump's case, literally took a shot for democracy, as he put it. And I think Musk is just an utterly fascinating character. And when I had a bit of time with him, just with a little group of three of us, for an hour, he was just really interesting guy, you know. But you could see he was looking at you, and sometimes you think he's gone a bit vacant. And you're talking about whatever it is, and he's thinking about colonizing Mars. And literally, his brain has moved to colonizing Mars, and he's probably just thought of something. And he said an interesting thing. He said, like, you have to remember everything. He said, if you replicate Earth, if you forget one vitamin, everyone dies up there. So you can't forget anything. Right, it's like really interesting. But, you know, ultimately, he says you've got to have somewhere else to go. Otherwise, one day this won't exist. Then what do you do? It's over. So he's trying to save us from ourselves. One-on-one, I found him extremely charming, highly intelligent. I mean, he did a little Q&A first for a small group of us, and I was peppering him with questions. I think he knew I was lining up the interview. But, you know, I would love to interview him. And he's kind of agreed, but we'll see if he does it. I found him fascinating. I think he's one of the most brilliant minds in the world. I mean, no question. And I had that view reinforced by what he was like actually to see an action in the queue. And I think in his heart, Elon's a really good guy who has a really good outlook for the world. He wants to save us from ourselves. So I completely applaud him on that. I think on X, he's driving this whole free speech mission, and I salute him for it and cheer him on. But free speech should not come with zero limitation, and it certainly shouldn't come with no consequence, which I think on the second part he totally agrees. I think he's genuinely got a slight quandary about who you let on and who you don't. I mean, at the moment, it's like, should the Ayatollah of Iran be allowed an account on X if he's promoting violence?
He's very gender critical, mate, so probably not.
Right, and if he's promoting violence against Jewish people and Israel, you can make a good argument that he shouldn't be. But these are complex things. I don't pretend it's easy at all.
I hope that Elon Musk is heavily involved in helping Trump to trim down the ridiculously overlaid and overexpensive bureaucracy which has crippled America's government for many decades. I mean, look at Elon Musk's record. This is a guy behind SpaceX, behind Tesla, behind Neuralink, who's taken on Twitter and try to make it a fairer platform for free speech, which I would argue he has done. In the last election, there was clear interference by the tech bosses to suppress free speech, which could have affected the result of that election. The Hunter Biden laptop story that the New York Post, who I write for, had exposed was banned from anyone seeing it on Twitter for 2 weeks because of the election coming up. That is suppression of information that could have been materially impactful on the election result. So I think Elon Musk, he's an extraordinary character. He's a tour de force. I would absolutely trust Elon Musk over anyone in the American federal government to work out how to make savings. He went into X, Twitter as it was then, and he fired half the staff almost immediately. And guess what? The whole thing continued to work perfectly fine. And so I would absolutely back Elon Musk. And for all the liberals who throw their toys out of the pram about him, I'd say he was one of you. But he was so put off by what he called the woke mind virus, which has been a really insidious scourge on society, not just here in America, but also in Europe and the UK. And this vote here has been people saying, enough of this nonsense. We are just not going to have a society anymore where people try and introduce this woke mindset to every aspect of our lives. And Elon Musk has been leading that. I applaud him.
There's something I wanted to say about Elon that I forgot to.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I can slip this in.
Of course.
Not only has he made electric cars a daily conversation for people, whether or not you own one, you're certainly thinking about it. He is transforming access to space to become something affordable. And to do that requires something that he's been doing quite spectacularly, which is reusing booster parts. And, the boosters of his Falcon come back and they stick the landing, makes great video. He did the chopstick recovery of the booster for his larger
We're looking at it now.
vessel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He posted this.
Yeah.
He posted this overnight. It's utterly staggering footage. I mean, the way this thing reconnects is unbelievable. What do you think when you see this?
No, I think consider that if you flew from New York to London on a 747 and they shoved it off the cliff and rolled out another one, your trip from New York to London would cost you $1 million. Yeah. So the fact that we reuse airplanes is a very important fact for aviation.
Yeah.
And the fact that now Elon is pioneering the reuse of rocket boosters will, in fact, be extremely important going forward for the affordable access to space. And I wanted to get that in there. Very important.
Elon's other big thing is global fertility. As a lot of people, if you had asked them, said, oh, well, there's too many people on planet Earth. Elon's been saying the complete opposite. And now the numbers are accelerating exactly as he warned, with many countries looking like they're really having serious birth rate issues.
The one that we're in right now is one of them.
Right.
1.4 is the current birth rate in the UK. That means that for every 100 British people today, there will be 35 great-grandchildren. So a 65...
And how does that compare to, say, 50 years ago?
I think that we would be way over replacement. I think that we would be at something like 2.4, maybe 2.6, maybe more. South Korea is the worst in the world. I think they're at 0.4 at the moment.
And why are they so bad?
It's an interesting question. There's a 4Bs movement, which is kind of this sort of extremist feminist movement that was kind of captured in adopted, I guess, by America after Trump's victory recently. There seems to be a whole different bunch of reasons for this. Some of the most uncomfortable ones are that women are struggling to find eligible partners because they're outperforming men in education and employment. A lot of policies have been put in place to help lift women up. And then as men have started to fall, women blasted through and overtook men socioeconomically. And as men started to fall behind, the world doesn't feel quite so prepared to give men that same leg up. In short, if women have a problem, we say, what can we do to fix society? But if men have a problem, we say, what are we doing where men can't fix themselves? And, in some ways, that's a hopeful vision for men being able to lift themselves up by their bootstraps. But the other side of that is if any group, if any social group is struggling with achievement in the real world or support or mental health or actual health, physical health, we don't say, man up and sort it out yourself. We spend billions in taxpayer-funded money and organizations and charities and fundraisers to work out what the problem is and do that on their behalf and help. It just doesn't seem to be as popular when it's men that are on the receiving end. That doesn't seem to be what we want.
If this trend continues, what will be the consequence for the planet?
We are going to see a peak in global population at less than 10 billion. It doesn't look like we're even going to touch 10 billion, and it will drop off precipitously. The interesting thing about population decline is that it is a existential risk that creeps up on us without you seeing it. There's no smog in the sky, there's no increasing temperature, water levels, there's none of that stuff. What you have is a still increasing population because the population is getting older, even as you have fewer and fewer children, and then you have this huge drop-off. You have ever fewer young people supporting ever more old people. Economic growth shrinks precipitously unless, and this is the only way that we can really fix it, two ways, both through technology and artificial intelligence. One being outsourcing a lot of the labor and a lot of the work that's done to improve efficiency by putting that over to robotics and AI. And the other side being...
Which is bound to happen.
Yes, it will, but will it be able to offset? And the other one being fertility treatments that can extend the number, the viability, and the window within which people can have kids. But if you actually look at what people are saying, a lot of the time they're saying, I don't want to have kids. It's not just that I'm trying to have kids and I can't. This isn't all sperm count, testosterone, estrogen in the water.
It's lifestyle choice.
Correct. The number one reason that people say that they don't want to have kids is just not ready yet. But there's some really interesting data. Stephen J. Shaw wrote an awesome documentary called Birth Gap that's all about the population decline. He said, he did some research, 4 out of 5, so 80% of women who do not have, they get to the end of their life without children, didn't intend to be childless. And these women have counseling groups, they grieve over families they never had. You've got these undertakers in Germany who are dealing with end of life, they've been in hospices, they've been in nursing homes, these people, and they have funerals and no one shows up. And when they do the embalming, when they take their clothes off to get them ready for cremation or for burial or whatever, they're finding bruises on their wrists and on their shoulders where it looks like they've been mistreated. So these people who've spent their entire lives contributing to a country, and then at the end of that are mistreated to then not even have somebody show up. I don't know. It's really, really concerning. And the only intervention that anybody thinks of immediately as soon as you bring this up is, well, you want to put women back into the kitchen. You want to take them out of the workplace. You want this to be the Handmaid's Tale. You go, no, I don't want that at all. But I don't want this species to fall off a cliff. And this is something that everybody can work out the implications of. Your political ideology is genetically predisposed, not predetermined, but predisposed. You tend to vote in line with your parents, not only because you grew up in their culture, but also because your politics have a personality predisposition to them, and that's inherited genetically. If you are the sort of political group, like the Democrats say, that puts a vasectomy clinic outside of one of your rallies, who do you think is going to be replicating? If you care about your political ideology, also being anti-natalist is the most seppuku logic that you can think of, because you're just kamikazing yourself into irrelevancy within the space of, you're going to be filled with Ben Shapiro's progeny, Mormons, whoever else it's going to be. The only people that have got, it seems, that are really above replacement rate are people in religions. So yeah, it's a conversation you're going to hear a lot more of. over the next few years.
Yeah.
It's going to become one of the biggest talking points.
And Elon Musk, not for the first time, is spot on.
He's also trying to contribute himself to
He's had 12 kids.
birth rate decline. Yeah, exactly. He's put his money where his mouth is.
You know, we've had our disagreements, but we are friends. And I would say for 95% of the time we've known each other, we've been friends.
I bet that 5% was rough, though, knowing both of you.
It was a little rough. Yeah, things got a little bumpy at one point. And I think I have more tolerance for risk than Peter does. So I was sort of maybe more kind of pedal to the metal, and Peter was like, well, let's be a little cautious here. He may have been right, actually.
A, is that characterization correct? Do you think he is a bigger risk taker than you? And B, is he also perhaps right that your way is probably more sensible?
I certainly would never want to bet against Elon. I would never want to compete head on with Elon. And probably a lot of what he says is correct. Certainly the Silicon Valley perspective on Elon in the 2000s was that he was starting these two crazy companies. There was Tesla, the car company, and SpaceX, the rocket company. They both sounded super crazy. If only one of them had succeeded, one might still have said that it was just extraordinarily lucky. The fact that to first approximation both have wildly succeeded. I always want to say it tells us something that Elon knows something about risk the rest of us don't. So there's some way it looks like it's this high wire crazy risk taking act, and somehow somehow you can't have two companies succeed in such an extraordinary way without actually really not taking as many crazy risks as it looks. And so I don't know. There's the conversation I've had with Elon is what did you know about how do you understand risk in ways that the rest of us don't? And then I think there's something he understands about it we don't. It's hard to articulate. I don't know if he can articulate it, but that's sort of where I'm at today.
He has I met him for the first time in France this summer, and he did a little Q&A on a boat for about 15 of us, and then I had about an hour with him afterwards. Utterly fascinating just to be exposed to his brain close up like that. He was talking about colonizing Mars and why we had to do this and how it would be done. He talked about Neuralink, he talked about humanoid robots. It was just one after another of these enormous big picture things, all of which I concluded as I was hearing them, he comes from a place, it seems to me, he just wants to save the planet from itself, really. And he kind of has a brain that can get his head around this big picture stuff, but in relation to the risk, it just strikes me, he's just prepared to back himself in a way with sort of chilling self-confidence, the like of which actually, Trump is one of the only people I've seen who has a similar sort of unbelievably thick skin and self-confidence to do that, which is what you need, because there are so many people out there when you do this stuff who want to knock you down.
Yes, that's certainly correct, and there probably are all sorts of ways that one can critique Trump, or one can critique President Trump, or critique Elon. There are all sorts of things where it seems hard to know how to get it to work, and the anti-arguments are probably pretty good arguments, but they're also disabling, and they mean you will never do it. So, the challenge with going to Mars or even to the moon is that you have to make sure, in some ways you're creating, a escape valve for humanity. There's some way, if we completely mess up this planet, we'll have a backup. And then, of course, the risk is that you will just replicate all the bad governance structures we have on this planet elsewhere. And if you think only about the science and the technology, you will maybe not straightforwardly solve this political problem that he's in part thinking about. So there's sort of all sorts of critiques one can have like this. There was a conversation Demis, the DeepMind AI person, had with Elon back in 2013, where Demis told Elon, I'm working on the most important problem in the world. I'm building a superhuman AI. And then Elon responded, well, I'm working on the most important problem in the world. I'm turning humanity into interplanetary species. And then, Demis responded, well, my AI will be able to follow you to Mars. And then, in some ways, Demis won that particular exchange. And I want to say there's something important about the argument, but then on some level, it can't just be on that level, and you actually just have to do things and make things happen and build things, and that's the orientation Elon always has.
What do you make about him and Vivek Ramaswamy getting stuck into government bureaucracy and waste? The strong consensus view in the DC establishment is that this is going to go nowhere, that it's just absolutely impossible to fix things, and this is, it's going to be sort of a very, very frustrating dead end. And again, maybe, I'm not sure it's a contrarian view, but the alternate view I would say is, you should never bet against Elon. And isn't there, we all know there's an extraordinary amount of waste, and it is unsustainable. And the 6% of GDP deficits that the U.S. has cannot be sustained. They probably cannot even be sustained for, even the rest of this decade. And if this election stands for the proposition, there are two ways to resolve them. You can cut spending and cut waste, or you can raise taxes massively. And I take this election in the U.S. for standing for the proposition we're not going to go the European-style socialist route of having massive tax hikes. And then that suggests, you need to try something like the Doge thing, and that's actually what is going to happen. And do you think?
And again, maybe we're in a very different moment from 5 years ago, pre-COVID. I think the statistic is something like 94% of the federal government workers are working from home. And what people learned in Silicon Valley, where you had remote work for 1 or 2 years, was remote work was not working. When people didn't come into the office, they weren't working. And initially, it was a sign of how powerful the workers were. They could insist on not working. And then after 2 years, the companies just fired a bunch of these people and reasserted control, because you realize, wow, there are all these people we hired and they're not working, and it doesn't matter, and we can just get rid of them. And isn't that the lesson that we should draw from these 4 or 5 years of the government workers not working? That not that they have to necessarily come back to the office, but maybe we don't need them altogether. And so I think we sort of knew this was the case in 2019. We really know it in 2024, and so there is sort of a natural rationality to what Elon is doing, and it's at the point where it's obvious to you, and it's obvious to me, and it's obvious to lots of people, and it's obvious to all of us that it's obvious to everybody else. At some point, you can get a preference cascade, and maybe something can really break here.
He hinted that you and he had largely had a pretty good relationship, but it had its odd wobble. You've got him and Trump, obviously two gigantic figures with healthy egos. A lot of people thinking this can't last, they're bound to fall out, there's going to be a clash. What do you think? What's your read of that relationship?
I don't know. Again, there are all these ways you're tempted to read it in these sort of soap opera terms, where we're focused on the larger than life personalities, and how is there room for two of these people on the same planet, or you can ask all these sorts of questions. But I think if we take a non-soap opera view and go back to the substance and the real problems we have, there's plenty of work for them to do. There's plenty of them to focus on. They are, in some sense, they both have a common enemy in the zombie establishment, the stagnation, the sense that nothing's been working for quite some time, and I don't think that enemy is going to go away anytime soon.
Has the president-elect offered you a job yet?
I'm not able to, I'm not going to do anything on a full-time basis. One can do things like, what Elon is doing. You can't go full-time into government if you've been in a tech position like I have. It's just the sort of things you have to be realistic about what you can and can't do.
But is there an Elon style role?
Look, it's not. It's just not my area of comparative advantage. I think politics is very important. It's also I would find it deeply frustrating. I'd go out of my mind if I spend all my time doing about it. So I think it's super important. I enjoy going on your show, thinking about it every now and then. If I spent my whole life thinking about this, man, I'd be depressed and crazy.